The US Congress's House Oversight Committee is going to go to a sensitive compartment information facility to hear about David Grusch's report to the Inspector General. There's a public AI arms race that's happening, and that overlooks classified research into AI. Elena Danaan on the Starseeds Envoy program and death reincarnation traps. Accidental Truth and UFO Revelations, an interview with Ron James. Tim Burchett is interviewed about official pushback over UFO secrecy in the US Congress. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick to resign as the AARO Director after drawing criticism for his gatekeeping efforts. How China's development of AI robots relates to ET concern over synthetic life forms. A lucid dreaming device has been developed that echoes past life memory machines that JP has experienced. Superhumans Consciousness and ET Contact, an interview with Caroline Corey. Timothy Alberino returns from Peru with new information about the alien sightings, and the Anglo-Saxon Report, an attempt to start up World War III around Iran.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the Exopolitics Today Week in Review for November 11. Don't forget, if you want the references to the articles that I cite in this Week in Review, then you can just go to my Twitter feed, which is twitter.com/Michael Salla. And it's been an event-packed week, lots to discuss, so let's get into it. So let's bring up my Twitter feed for this week. And I'm going to start here with the information that was put out by Anna Paulina Luna from the House Oversight Committee, who said that she or the House Oversight Committee got permission to go to a SCIF facility to read the report by David Grusch. He's the key whistleblower who appeared in the July UFO hearing before Congress, for members of the House Oversight Committee to read his report to the Inspector General. So that's quite a development, because apparently he was able to say things in his report to the Inspector General that he was not able to say in Congress due to concerns over classification. So we look forward to hearing more about what happens when the members of Congress go into that SCIF facility to read the report that David Grusch made to the Inspector General. Now, it's not quite clear if it's going to be the Inspector General for the Department of Defense, where he wrote a comprehensive report about the UAPs, non-human intelligence, or whether it's to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, where he was issuing a complaint because of reprisals over his initial report to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense. So that's not quite clear yet, but we will learn about it. Well, here's a fascinating webinar that Elena Danaan did, and that covered Starseeds and Envoys. So she talked about Starseeds. Everyone knows about or has heard about Starseeds, individuals who have led lives on other planets that have come to Earth and have decided to reincarnate here. And that's different to the Envoy program that Elena says is a result of beings on other worlds, extraterrestrials, learning about a mission, a Galactic Federation of Worlds mission to Earth, and they volunteer for that mission, and they come to Earth as part of a Envoy program where they are playing a clear role in this initiative. So that's well worth watching her webinar just to get clarity on those distinctions. But the one that really got me interested, very interesting, were the death reincarnation traps that Elena discussed. And she brought up a interview or a webinar that Alex Collier had earlier presented, where he talks about death traps or reincarnation traps. And I'm sure many of you have heard the stories that's been made famous by many books of people having these NDE or near-death experiences. They see a white light, they start going towards the light, and they feel love, a lot of love, and they see relatives beckoning them to come forward, and they move into the light, just getting overwhelmed by bliss, seeing relatives, and then they're told, no, your mission hasn't finished, you've got to go back. And so the kind of information or the conclusions that emerge from that is that the going into the light for those that experience death is actually a good thing, because you go in and it's all about love, it's all about reconnecting with dead relatives and so forth. Well, the information that Alex Collier released, and I know there have been others that have talked about the death traps. David Icke is one, and Elena kind of confirms that this is exactly right, that you actually don't want to go into the light, that light is a reincarnation cycle. It's a trap. It's a soul trap, if you like, or a death trap, where you get born again into the earth. And in Buddhist literature, it's the wheel of samsara, or the cycle of birth and death, and you get trapped in it. So this is a way of understanding that white light is not actually a way for you to ascend to higher levels. It's going into that white light, you actually go back into this reincarnation cycle where your family, friends, and so forth, you all agree to, or maybe separately, all reincarnate, and maybe you get to experience life again, maybe not as brother and sister, but maybe as husband and wife, and so on and so on. Well, according to Alex Collier, he says that in the death experience, when you rise up out of the body and you see the light opening up before you, and you see relatives and you feel that love with the light, he says the thing to do is to turn around, do a 180 and look behind you. And he says, you'll see the universe. And I think that, and he says that if you then put out a call that I want to go home, that you will then go to that dimension which you originally came from. So, if you're part of an Envoy program or a starseed, then you will go to that planet or to that civilization dimension and so forth. So I thought that was very important information. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. It fits in with the way the Buddhists describe the wheel of samsara. As for ghosts or astral entities, those that don't move forward, I mean, these are people who don't go into the light, but they don't have an understanding of the universe to embrace the universe and go into the universe. So they get caught up in the astral realms. So, yeah, this is, I think, a very important piece of information to understand. So, Elena, her webinar is available online. You can watch the replay. You can go to Crowdcast. The link is here. Just click the link on my Twitter feed. It'll take you to her webinar page, and you can just watch the webinar. It's very affordable. So I did an interview with Ron James, Accidental Truth and UFO Revelations. And a fascinating interview. He is someone who's been involved in the film industry for many decades. And he gave the documentary, Accidental Truth, that name because he says when he was interviewing people, sometimes they would say things that they weren't going to discuss. So they would kind of let slip certain truths. I mean, when you're talking with people that have been in government positions in the military, often they're very concerned not to break their NDAs, and so they will hedge and not be too forthcoming. But if they are feeling comfortable and they let slip certain information, then that's, according to Ron James, an accidental truth, and he caught a few of those on camera. So that is well worth watching. He is also part of this Hollywood UFO disclosure group. So he announced he talked about that. And that is something that I think is going to become very important in the future, this Hollywood UFO disclosure group, because there's a lot of independent filmmakers like Ron James and like Carolyn Corey, who I also interviewed, and her interview came out this week, who are producing really wonderful documentaries loaded with interviews and a lot of very helpful information about what's really going on. And I think that this independent filmmaking and UFO disclosure is a good insight into what we can expect to happen in the future as more and more people get drawn to the UFO information, and as Hollywood continues to toe the line of the CIA's kind of like disinformation program. I mean, that you can go all the way back to 1953 with the Robertson panel, where a report was issued, and that report actually called for the entertainment industry, and we're talking about Hollywood and radio, to actually ridicule the flying saucer UFO phenomenon, to ridicule people saying that they were having direct face-to-face experiences with the extraterrestrials. So, that's been around us. That's been around for 70 years now, that report. And now you have independent film makers becoming much more successful and prominent in Hollywood. So that's a good thing. So it remains to be seen how effective the Hollywood UFO Disclosure Initiative is going to be. We'll see. Next, I want to go to something here. Chris Mellon, he's a former Department of Defense official, and he gave a presentation. And in this presentation, he had a slide in this presentation, which I thought was very interesting. In that slide, he claims that sources have confirmed that the US government has recovered and has begun reverse engineering of UFO or UAP materials. Now, and Chris Mellon has been working with the Senate, US Senate, and the UAP Disclosure Act. So he's a very prominent former official in the Department of Defense involved with intelligence and security. And so he describes three sources that are knowledgeable about UAPs that he knows about, and he describes source number one as describing the management, control structure, and authorities identified US Air Force gatekeeper. So that individual has described what is being done to make sure that this UAP information doesn't get out into the public arena. I mean, many people are aware that the US Air Force has been suppressing information on UAPs for decades. So here, Chris Mellon is saying that that is true, and that there's a kind of system to all of that and a structure to it. Source number two, this is a source that claims to have assessed technical data on a recovered UAP and to be knowledgeable of a USS exploitation program. Claims another country has recovered the device as well. So a second source knows about a recovered UFO program and reverse engineering of this. So we've been having people talk about these kinds of programs for decades now. We have, for example, Clifford Stone, who talked about his direct involvement in Project Moondust, and Project Bluefly, where he was involved in crash retrieval operations, and sometimes they would go into other countries. And so here, this second source says that other countries, and presumably we're talking either about Russia or China. I imagine Russia would be a country that has many recovered UFO devices. And the third source claims to have subordinates working on reverse engineering, believes the US tracks UAPs as they enter the atmosphere. So in these cases, here's another one saying that, yes, they're working on reverse engineering. So Chris Mellon is putting out information that he's knowledgeable about, credible sources saying that, yes, UFOs have been recovered and they're being reverse engineered. Now, this is where we get into the question of, is this part of limited hangout? Because what I've found coming from the whole litany of people that are associated with David Grusch or Bob Lazar, that, or say Lua Elizondo, the ATIP program, at best they talk about recovered UAPs and unsuccessful reverse engineering programs. None of them talk about successful reverse engineering. And so you ask yourself, why is that? Well, because that's crossing a red line. It's okay to talk about unsuccessful reverse engineering, saying that, well, we've recovered these UFOs, they're of non-human intelligence, but they're just too advanced for us to understand, because that fits into whatever narrative that the deep state has prepared for us. Because I think we are on the cutting edge of some kind of alien false flag event. So I think this fits into the narrative, a limited hangout, that yes, we've recovered some of the extraterrestrial spacecraft, but we don't understand them. They're just too advanced for us. They're a mystery. So that feeds into the uncertainty, the confusion, and I think that suits the deep state well for what they plan to unveil very soon. Okay, so here's a discussion where you have Congressman Timothy Burchett from East Tennessee, who's being interviewed on Weaponized, which is the podcast of George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, and they discuss they discuss the kind of pushback Tim Burchett has gotten from the US in the US Congress as a result of his efforts to bring about transparency on the UFO issue. So this is Tim Burchett being interviewed there, and he's very forthcoming. I think he is someone that really wants to find answers on what's going on. But he explains that even though he's a member of Congress, he isn't given the same level of security clearance as, say, others in the intelligence committees in the Congress, where they get access to these classified programs. So he's very much on the outside, even though he's part of a House Oversight committee that you would think would have a need to know or should be given access to these programs, that he is not allowed. And so he's very forthcoming on why there is this culture of secrecy in the US Congress, how certain members are denied access and other members are, but those who are given access they are not very forthcoming with other members of Congress who don't have that level of clearance. So well worth watching this particular episode of Weaponized, just to get a feel of what's happening right now in the Congress. And there is going to be another hearing in the US Congress in the House Oversight Committee, and the UAP caucus has been established, but there's been no support for the creation of a House Select committee on UAPs, not yet anyway. So I think we probably will get that, but not quite at the moment. So here we have some news that emerged this week. It became official after rumors began emerging that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the head of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is resigning. And a lot of people began complaining about him because he was gatekeeping. There were whistleblowers going forward, releasing information at great risk to their reputations and to their careers, releasing information to the AARO office, which they are protected from by the provisions in the National Defence Authorization Act for 2023, which gave protection to whistleblowers concerning the UFO issue who went to the AARO office, and that they could disclose that information and not be constrained by their non-disclosure agreement. So that's very important. That was a very important kind of breakthrough. But the problem was that even though they were reporting to the AARO office, Sean Kirkpatrick was doing nothing with it. And in fact, criticizing whistleblowers like David Grusch, who were revealing what was going on, that there were many whistleblowers saying this is happening. And Sean Kirkpatrick was making it out that David Grusch was an unreliable figure and really criticized him for casting aspersions on the AARO office, saying, well, how dare they question us? We've given you data on 800 UAP sightings, and look at, of those 800 UAP sightings, like 100 and so forth are unexplained, and over half of those reports are orbs and so forth. And that's where he wanted to keep the AARO office focused on these reports of UFO sightings. And that's kind of ridiculous when you think that, why would you just focus exclusively on reports of UFO sightings and say probes or orbs when you actually have people reporting that there are captured extraterrestrial spacecraft in corporate government facilities and that these are being reverse engineered? Why would you ignore that? But that's what was happening. And so eventually Kirkpatrick decided that he would resign. But nevertheless, now that he has announced his resignation, he is now starting to be a little more forthcoming, and I will come back to that. So let's go on. So here's a story in the Business Insider concerning robots. China claims that it plans to mass produce humanoid robots that can reshape the world within 2 years. So it's going to be using AI. China is a world leader in AI, second only to the United States. Russia, I think, is pretty close to those leading powers, but still China is a leading developer of AI, and it wants to mass produce humanoid robots. Well, what can go wrong with that? Well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, in my tweet or X, I talk about the Italian friendship case from 1956 to 1978. And in that case, over 100 individuals were contacted in Europe. It is undoubtedly the most substantiated case of extraterrestrial contact in the world because you had it running for over 22 years. These extraterrestrials established a base in the northeast area of Italy where they had over 100 individuals interacting with their representatives. And they actually had people that were working with them, Italian citizens, bringing in lorries or truckloads of food to the extraterrestrials. And all of this was, of course, being monitored very closely by NATO. And NATO was very comfortable with this. They were okay. They were gathering intelligence on these beings. And what these extraterrestrials, they very tall extraterrestrials, what they described was that they were being hunted by a synthetic life form that they had created on their home world. and that after a period of time, their homeworld had been overrun by these extraterrestrials, that these organics had to leave their homeworld, and the synthetics were hunting them. Well, if you think that sounds familiar, well, you're right. That is precisely the theme or the idea in the Battlestar Galactica TV series, which emerged in the 1970s. And no less than Leslie Stevens IV, who was the son of a US Navy Admiral, Leslie Stevens III. And Leslie Stevens wrote the pilot episode for this Battlestar Galactica series because it was soft disclosure. He was part of this soft disclosure initiative being initiated by the US Navy to get the general public up to speed with what was really happening in space. And Leslie Stevens, he was the one that actually inspired or actually helped Gene Roddenberry create Star Trek. That Leslie Stevens helped him develop plots, helped him find actors and the crew. Gene Roddenberry actually spent close to a year on the set of The Outer Limits, which had many of the actors and some of the themes and plots of stories that later appeared in the Star Trek series. So Leslie Stevens was very important for the Star Trek series and also for the Battlestar Galactica series. And the Battlestar Galactica series was in fact predicated on this idea that extraterrestrials that create AI life forms eventually lose control of the life forms, who then take control of the planet and then wage a war of extermination against their creators. I mean, very disturbing, but there is some truth to that. So China developing humanoid robots that it wants to mass produce, not a good idea. I mean, China is really a neophyte in many ways when it comes to these secret space programs. And so hopefully common sense will prevail in China to prevent this from happening. And, why does China, with a population of 1.4 million, need AI robots? I mean, it doesn't make much sense. Okay, so let's move on. Here's a report on the significance of the House of Representatives passing an amendment to have David Grusch's security clearance restored so he can brief Congress about classified UAP data in a SCIF, in a sensitive compartment information facility. David Grusch, when he resigned, when he left the service with the US Geospatial Agency and left the US government, apparently his security clearances were withdrawn, which is very unusual because typically officials keep their security clearances even when they leave one job, because those security clearances are very important for them to get jobs with another organization or, say, with a contractor. But in the case of David Grusch, I mean, his security clearance is withdrawn in a case that was a case of retaliation for him actually sending a report to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense saying that there was a lot of information about UFOs, non-human intelligence, reverse engineering, captured craft that was not getting through to the AARO office, or AARO was not reporting on it. And so there were people in government that weren't happy with that, and so he was retaliated against, and his security clearance was withdrawn. So, not only does that mean that Grush doesn't have security clearances now to apply for other jobs in his field of specialty, but if he talks about the things that he classified items that he talked about, if he talks about these publicly or talks about them at all without a security clearance, he can be arrested. So this is one of the reasons why Congress is moving to have his security clearance restored, so that he can now talk about these classified issues in a sensitive compartment information facility, a SCIF, with those members of Congress that want to learn about what he knows on these classified UAP programs. Okay, so that is something that Cristina Gomez, she provided a very succinct overview of that. And so she's doing very good work in her coverage of UFOs. Okay, so here's something that I found fascinating, and that is the development of a machine that could actually record or that could induce lucid dreams on demand. So apparently, this technology is now about to be released into the public arena, where you hook up this machine to you or this device, and it will create or induce lucid dreams on demand, which is wonderful, because for those of you that have ever tried to have lucid dreams, it's a bit of a process. Definitely, you got to work at it. But here's a device that can induce it in you very easily. Now, the thing that got my attention about this story that came out in Vice, the online paper, what got my attention about that story was that this made me think of a technology that JP, who's currently active in the US Army, told me about when he was part of a classified mission. He was taken to a room where there were these machines, and you would sit in these machines, and they would create these lucid dreams. But he said that they actually weren't lucid dreams after all, at all. They were actually past life memories, and that there was a recording device or monitor attached to this device that would induce these lucid dreams or past life memories, and they would be recorded. So this is, I think, what is happening in the classified world, that they have these technologies now that can record people's past life memories, lucid dreams, record those and analyze those for their own agenda. And now in the public arena, we're getting the kind of the first version of the lucid dream. And is it a lucid dream? Is it a past life memory? Very interesting. So this is what is being released into the public arena fairly soon. Right. Now, here's the interview I did with Caroline Corey, where we discuss a number of her documentaries. She has a number of documentaries that we discuss: Superhuman, E.T. Contact, They Are Here, and A Tear in the Sky. And I mean, really fascinating stories that she had to share about her own background. Caroline is herself a contactee. She has had experiences since age 5 with different off-world civilizations, and she has produced these different documentaries discussing various aspects of extraterrestrial contact and the kind of potentials that you people have with these contacts. So in one of the documentaries, E.T. Contact, They Are Here, The Science of Contact, she interviews people who have had direct contact, and interviews experts about these contact cases. So, fascinating documentary. Superhumans, that was one that really I think is fascinating in terms of the way in which people can be blindfolded, and that process can be used for them to activate these inherent potentials. I mean, I first heard about this. I mean, sure, you can read about it, or you can. I mean, it's throughout science fiction and martial arts movies. People that are blindfolded, fighting and feeling the force and so forth. But I first saw a vivid demonstration of this when I went to a retreat organized by Jay-Z Knight. She channels this Atlantean king, former king, called Ramtha, and she trains her students to be able to use their sixth sense or telekinesis or telepathic abilities. And so, they will wear blindfolds. So in Superhumans, Caroline focuses on children, and she shows the kind of really incredible abilities some of these children have when they are raised in a nurturing environment to believe that, yeah, it's possible. Yeah, put on a blindfold. You can read that book through the blindfold. Yeah, you can ride the bicycle through the, even though you're wearing a blindfold. And sure, you can walk around with the blindfold. I mean, quite amazing that this is going on. It just shows what potential we have. And of course, those that are children, especially that are trained or encouraged to believe in their abilities, that they can achieve phenomenal results. And the third documentary we discussed was her most recent, A Tear in the Sky, where she had 3 crews that were filming in the California coastal area to get sight of a tic tac or of a UFO, and they actually were able to film a tic tac. They were able to get film footage of that. So you can watch my interview with Caroline Corey, where she discusses all of this, and she is also part of this Hollywood UAP disclosure initiative. So that's a very positive development. Okay, so the second Mexican Congress hearing was held, and in this hearing, there were experts that came forward, and they authenticated the Peruvian mummies. That these were, in fact, I think it was like 1,500 years old. That they were non-human, or at least that they were genuine. That these were not fake. I mean, a lot of critics said that, oh, these mummies were just composites. They were just put together, part of a hoax, part of a scam. And in fact, some were, but not all of them. Not all of them were. Some of these were genuine. They were examined by experts, multiple experts, medical experts, forensic experts, and they found that these were, in fact, genuine 1,500-year-old mummies of non-human forms. Now, that didn't mean that they were extraterrestrial. That's where the experts didn't go as far as the organizer of this hearing, which was Jaime Maussan, went. Jaime Maussan believes that these mummies are signs of extraterrestrials establishing a colony on Earth, or that these mummies are related to some extraterrestrial intelligence, and I think that's probably correct. But the experts are being much more cautious, and they're saying, well, all we can say conclusively is that these are at the very least another human species that we do not know of. So that's very important, because critics of Jaime Maussan and of these mummies being authentic, they overlook that the experts have determined that they are authentic. I mean, why focus on the hoaxed mummies? Because there are hoaxed mummies. But why would you focus just on the hoaxed mummies and ignore the ones that are genuine? Because the experts are focusing on the genuine mummies, and that's what Jaime Maussan and others have been putting out into the public arena. Okay, so here's a fascinating report by Timothy Alberino, who just traveled to Peru. Timothy has spent 10 years in the Amazonian region of Peru, living amongst the tribes there. He was part of a missionary family, and so he got to spend time with the tribes. He speaks the local Spanish dialect fluently, and he went there to investigate these reports of aliens or face peelers, the pelacaras, I think it is. Yeah, that's the pelacaras that have this kind of reputation in that part of the world for kind of like peeling off the skin of people and mutilating their bodies, a kind of like a human mutilation, if you like. And he was able to interview the villagers and get more information about exactly what it was that was seen. And so he was able to determine that these apparent aliens were floating on a circular platform. He said it was as much as 12 feet in diameter, and that they also wore these shoes on them, that these kind of shoes that kind of could levitate them. So these platforms, these flying platforms, could take them from A to B, or from one location to another location, even up in the atmosphere or in the mountains or in space or whatever, very, very quickly. But when they jumped off the platforms, these shoes that they were wearing also were some kind of anti-gravity device, and they could float around. But the platforms were what enabled them to cover great distances, whereas the shoes were designed for kind of short distances. But again, it would levitate them. So one of the things that Timothy Alberino concluded was that the attacks were not contrived by gold miners. So the report goes for an hour and 3/4. So you can go to just go to or you can go to Timothy Alberino to his Twitter feed, or go to my Twitter feed to watch his after action report on his expedition. And his conclusion about what is this phenomenon, are these truly aliens, or are these kind of say gold miners pretending, wearing jetpacks, pretending to be aliens to scare the locals? He ridicules, he dismisses the gold miner explanation as just nonsense, given all the facts. But what he goes for, his conclusion, is that these were humans, because the villagers reported hearing the beings on these craft. One of them spoke a kind of a local dialect of Spanish, so that was probably an interpreter that was on that device, and the other one was someone that spoke with a kind of an accent, like an American accent. So the villagers thought that these were, well, Timothy Alberino, when he heard that, he reached the conclusion that this is probably part of a classified program involving humans using reverse engineered extraterrestrial technologies, because floating platforms that can take the occupants high up into the atmosphere very quickly, or kind of levitating boots, I mean, that is not part of any kind of open source technology that we're aware of. This is part of the classified world. And this kind of adds strength. I think Timothy Alberino has to be commended for going to the expense and the trouble to go to Peru to investigate this, because I think this does investigate claims that what we are witnessing in Peru is the prelude to some kind of false flag alien event. Because why else would a classified program send two of its personnel to harass Amazonian villagers in the Peruvian kind of outposts? I mean, why would they do that? I think it's clear that they're wanting to scare these villagers and get that information out, which has in fact happened. So I think this overall, it does strengthen the concern that the deep state is going to try and pull off some kind of alien false flag event. And speaking of alien false flag events, Kerry Cassidy on her Project Camelot website has just re-released the Anglo-Saxon mission videos or the report that came out in March of 2010, where she and Bill Ryan talked about a British whistleblower who was part of the British military. He reached a kind of middle officer rank, probably like a commander or something like that. And then he resigned, and because he could keep a secret and because of his military background, he was given a senior bureaucratic post within the City of London. And so it was assumed that he was someone that could keep a secret. So he heard the plans of what the deep state were planning. And they were very concerning, that there's a lot of information there. But essentially, it was that they were planning a succession of wars that the City of London, along with the British Monarchy, were planning these wars that would culminate in Iran being attacked either by Israel or the United States or both, and that this would drag in China and Russia and turn it into a third world war that would lead to millions of deaths and nuclear weapons being exchanged. And so when he put this out, he said it would happen in the next couple of years. So that was 2010. Of course, nothing like that happened, and people forgot about that. But now we are at this point where something similar is about to break out. And again, there are these attempts to get Iran blamed for the Hamas attacks against Israel and try and build up this narrative that Hamas and Iran are working side by side. And that actually, for those that are knowledgeable about the Middle East, is actually nonsense, because Hamas are working with the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's a Sunni faction, whereas Iran is Shiite. And the Sunnis and the Shiites have been fighting this war, this desperate civil war in Syria for the last half dozen years. And Hamas, or representatives of Hamas, had been part of that, fighting against the Iranian personnel, volunteers, the Shiite factions from Syria, from Lebanon, like Hezbollah, have been fighting against the Sunni militants, including Hamas. So when when there's this mainstream media narrative saying that Iran secretly supplied and helped Hamas to launch this devastating attack against Israel, what's really happening there is a narrative is being created to justify an attack against Iran that would either be an attack by Israel in retaliation for Iran helping the Hamas militants, or because the United States might blame Iran if there is some kind of terrorist attack in the United States linked to the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip, and that the US will then say, well, Iran is responsible for the Hamas attacks there. So Iran is responsible for whatever happens in the US, which again is just trying to create a false narrative to get Iran blamed or made a target for any kind of retaliation, either by either by Israel or by the United States. And this is part of what was described in the Anglo-Saxon Mission Report. So that's why Kerry Cassidy released this. Her intel is that, yes, there are these efforts to manufacture a third world war. She cites a number of sources. One of the things that I found very significant was that recently I have found that the British monarchy actually does play a very big role, a major role in running Earth affairs. I really wasn't aware of just how prominent the British were in that. Like a lot of people researching international politics, exopolitics, conspiracy theories. I mean, you hear about the Rothschilds, you hear about the Vatican, but the British monarchy is not something we hear too much about. But from my sources, I've been told that the British monarchy, King Charles III, actually they have a very big role in steering global events behind the scenes. So that's something that we really need to pay attention to. And now this is where I think there is, we need to not kind of get into a place of fear, because I think this is where I disagree with Kerry Cassidy. I mean, Kerry has a much more alarmist view about what lies ahead. Her view is that the Draco reptilians, the AI intelligence, that they are in a place of ascendance, that they are steering all these global events, and there's a big shitstorm coming, and it's not going to be fun anymore. Whereas my information, and I've gotten this from my sources that are working with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, working with Nordic extraterrestrials, working with positive extraterrestrials, that the Draco reptilians have left. Now, the people I'm working with, Elena, Danaan, Jean-Charles Moyen, JP, Alex Collier, they're contactees. And I think it's very important that we consult with contactees to get a better understanding of what's happening around the world. Now, someone, Kerry Cassidy, I'm sure, would say, well, she's getting her information from insiders, and they are, or there are a few people, other sources. Cliff High has also talked about this happening, some kind of catastrophic events. Also, the Farsight Institute was talking about these catastrophic events, negative aliens, and so forth. Now, I think in trying to make sense of what's really happening right now, there was a story I covered about 6 months ago, and this was from John Peterson from the Arlington Institute, and he has been working with the U.S. Navy. His think tank is a Navy-funded think tank, and he put out information in an interview or in a discussion he did with Greg Braden. He said that he has 3 independent sources, so these have nothing to do with my sources. He has 3 independent sources saying that the negative extraterrestrials have been driven outside of our solar system. Okay, so that's independent corroboration for the information I'm getting from JP, Elena Danaan, Jean-Charles Moyen, Alex Collier, and so forth, that the negatives have been forced to leave our solar system, that the white hats are in control, that what we are witnessing right now is a show all designed to wake people up. So I don't think that we are going to have catastrophe in 2024, that this third world war is going to play out at all. I think there's going to be fighting. But it's going to be limited. It's not going to be anything like a world war. And I think that whatever fighting happens, that's going to be pretty much circumscribed, because at some point the white hats are going to end the show, the whole kind of Biden show, and this kind of like, let's say, suppression of the truth that the deep state has been perpetuating on the American public on a number of issues. White hats are going to come out. Space Command is a big factor in that, as is Northern Command, US Northern Command. These are led by 2 4-star generals who are working with the galactics, working with the positive extraterrestrials, and they are coordinating to reveal the truth. So I think we can look forward to 2024 being a bumpy ride, but we're going to be very, very happy with the end result. Nothing like a third world war where millions die, and that's followed by catastrophic earth changes where like half of the population is eliminated. I think that's not correct. Okay, so here we have Sean Kirkpatrick making statements. Now he's announced his resignation, and it seems that in his final few weeks, he wants to actually start to reveal some of the stuff that he was withholding. What a surprise. So Sean Kirkpatrick, he said in a statement that, quote, "We are investigating each and every one of Grush's claims. We're cross-referencing these. There are some bits of information that are turning out to be things and events that really happened." Well, that's a surprise. I mean, if you think back a few months ago, after the July 23rd hearings in the US Congress, Sean Kirkpatrick did a post on, I think it was on his LinkedIn page, where he all but called David Grusch a liar and someone casting aspersions on the AARO office for making all these wild claims, that there was no evidence of any of kind of like non-human intelligence and recovered craft. And now he's revealing the truth, that some bits of information are true. They really happened. So he's revealing some of the truth. I think he's kind of like, covering his six, as they say, because he is on his way out. So, rather than being skewered on his way out, he's dropping some truth bombs. So this was one truth bomb. David Grusch was actually revealing true things, things that really happened. Well, that's a surprise. Okay, fair enough. And it goes on. So Kirkpatrick said, in another statement that just came out, this is another tweet to another article. And in this article on the Hill, so he is now backtracking on another statement that he had made before NASA. He had gone to NASA. This was before the congressional hearing. He went before NASA, and he had said that there is no evidence of any of these UAPs being non-human intelligence. So he was saying no evidence of that. So he didn't want to go there. There's no evidence. He didn't want to discuss it. Now he's on his way out. He's saying, well, UAPs, there's only two explanations that make sense. Either they're aliens or they're a foreign power. And we don't think they're a foreign power because they're too complicated. So, okay, what are they? So again, he's now actually much more forthcoming. So it shows the guy was a gatekeeper. He knew the truth. And it only was when he was kind of like forced to resign because his gatekeeping just became too much of a problem. And now he's on his way out. He wants to cover his six. He wants to drop some truth bombs so he's not remembered as a lying asshole. He wants to be remembered as someone that actually dropped some truth bombs about what was really going on. So that's good for him that he did that on his way out. Would have been better if he did it while he was in that position of authority, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? I mean, we here in the public domain, when it comes to inside programs, insiders, whistleblowers, government programs, military, we're begging the masters at the table to give us a few morsels of truth here and there. And this is where I differ from a lot of my peers in the UFO community. People that I respect them, people like, say, Richard Dolan, Stephen Bassett, people who've been fighting the good fight. There are others that have been doing great work in getting out information about UAPs or getting out information about what insiders are saying. But I have always said, from when I got involved in this phenomenon from 2001, that if you want to know the truth, go to the contactees, go to the whistleblowers. These are the guys that are going to tell you the truth. You can get the big picture. So, I think at the end of the day, you can settle for these morsels from the people like Sean Kirkpatrick or those that are able to share some of the details of what they learned, people like Christopher Mellon, that I think that is going to give you some idea of what's going on, and that is going to appeal to people that want hard evidence, that want to know what is going on, that we can be certain of, and certainly I think that's where the work of some of these leading UFO researchers is very helpful. But if you want to know the big picture, you got to go beyond this kind of like, let's look at the UFO phenomenon. You got to start talking exopolitics. You cannot escape the term. I know a lot of people kind of don't want to use the exopolitics label because they think it's too loaded, just like the UFO term is loaded. But the exopolitics label, it is critical to understanding that there are extraterrestrial civilizations visiting us. The contactees know about it. They've been talking about it since the 1950s. You can go all the way back to George Adamski to get like reams of information about different extraterrestrial civilizations. You've got whistleblowers. I mean, some of the earliest whistleblowers go back to Stan Deyo in the 1970s, and William Cooper talked about the UFO phenomenon, about extraterrestrials visiting us. So whistleblowers and contactees, I think that's where you're going to get most of the truth. what's going to be happening in the US Congress. I think you're going to get a limited hangout. And I think we go back to what Congressman Tim Burchett was saying, that there is always this culture of secrecy. Even if you get some of the truth, it's only going to be the tip of the pyramid. So to really get the full truth, go to Exopolitics. Start listening to the contactees and some of the whistleblowers that have been revealing what's going on. So that is it for the week in review. Now, I do have a couple of announcements. One is we have a trailer for my next webinar, which is the Exopolitical State of the Planet. That's the webinar that's going to be held on November 25, where I'm going to go into depth on some of the issues I've discussed in this. Is a third world war going to happen? Is Iran going to be the trigger? What's going on in Ukraine? Are we going to have extraterrestrial disclosure, false flag? What is happening right now? What is the exopolitical state of the planet? What are the whistleblowers telling us? What are the contactees telling us about the big picture of planet Earth? That the planet Earth, we have lots of extraterrestrial ships surrounding us. Are they part of the draconian fleet that the Farsight Institute is trying to scare people into believing? Or are they part of the Seeders that are here to oversee this transition into an incredible future that humanity has, that I believe is more consistent with the information that I've gotten? So that is something that I will be talking about in the webinar. And so there's a trailer that's released at the same time as this week in review, so you can just watch it on my YouTube channel, or just go to exopolitics.org to watch it through that. So I want to thank you again for supporting my exopolitics research, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. Aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.